After the collapse of civilization, humanity gradually lost the ability to communicate, reverting to primal instincts and becoming feral creatures. A young man is forced to confront a harsh reality as he protects his ailing sister from a gang of cannibals. Initially, people survived by consuming the bodies of the dead, but as resources dwindled, they began hunting the living, turning cannibalism into the only means of survival. The story begins deep in the forest, where a man and a young boy cautiously navigate through dense vegetation. They spot a lone boar, small but large enough to satisfy their hunger. As they stealthily approach shooting distance, the bow draws a bow, strings an arrow, and hands it to the man. The man takes aim and releases the arrow, wounding the animal, failing to kill it. Following the blood trail, they arrive at a dried-up lake where the trail vanishes. At the center, they find only a weak fish, helplessly flopping on the parched ground. Disheartened, they return to the forest. On a narrow road cluttered with fallen trees, they discover two abandoned cars. Searching them for supplies, the man finds cigarette butts, a rare source of tobacco, while the boy discovers a pack of cookies, which he eats alone. However, as he notices the man approaching in the mirror, he accidentally hits the car horn, sending a loud noise echoing through the area and attracting predators. The sound draws a pack of wild, hungry dogs. The pair rush to hide in one of the cars, remaining silent as the dogs scour the area for prey. After a tense wait, the pack moves on, and the two resume their journey until they reach a concealed cabin camouflaged with branches. Inside, they are greeted by a sick girl lying on a bed with an inflamed wound on her abdomen. The man carefully filters water using a makeshift device, producing only a couple of cups. He gives one to the girl along with the last pill from their meager supply. Later, he steps onto the porch, silently smoking a hand-rolled cigarette made from the scavenged butts. At dawn, the boy wakes first and heads to an improvised toilet in the forest. Suddenly, he notices a group of strangers moving between the trees. Panicking, he runs back to the cabin and, after camouflaging the entrance, peers through a crack to observe the intruders. The man realizes they've been found and starts gathering their belongings. Taking the girl, they escape through a hidden exit just as the strangers break into the cabin. In their haste, they lose a bag of supplies. The man leads the boy and the girl to a pit, where he hides them before going to distract the intruders. A fight ensues, but outnumbered, the man sustains multiple injuries, including stab wounds. Despite wounding one attacker, the leader delivers a fatal blow. The gang packs the man's body, preparing it as food for transport. The leader notices a hidden toilet and approaches to investigate. He lifts the lid, but the boy and girl, hiding inside, hold it shut with all their strength. Unable to open it and detecting no scent of interest, the leader assumes it's empty and leaves with his group. Returning to the ransacked cabin, the boy spots the discarded cookie wrapper from the previous day. Realizing it's how the cannibals tracked them, he puts the girl to bed and notices her wound is severely infected. With the last of the medicine taken by the leader, he contemplates suffocating her with a pillow to spare her suffering, but cannot bring himself to do it. Instead, he prepares for a dangerous journey, wrapping his feet with makeshift bandages and taking a photograph of his deceased father. He sets out to retrieve the stolen medicine. The boy treks through abandoned, post-apocalyptic landscapes, shivering from the cold. Finally, he collapses on a riverbank. Lying on the ground, he notices a small boy nearby, who flees in fear. Quietly following him, the boy arrives at an old house where the child lives with his grandfather. Breaking down the door, he frightens the residents and takes their scant belongings, the old man's pants, shoes and jacket. Leaving the shelter, he resumes tracking the blood trail, which leads to a still warm campfire. Among the ashes, he finds human remains. Overwhelmed with shock, the boy buries the skull, realizing it's his father's remains. He climbs a tree to scout the area and spots smoke rising from another cannibal camp in the distance. Suddenly he slips and falls, injuring himself. The sound attracts barking dogs, which alert the resting cannibals. Despite the pain, the boy crawls back to the fire's embers, attempting to revive them for protection against predators. Through the night, he fends off the beasts, and by morning, he continues his journey. He stumbles upon an old tourist tent and cautiously approaches. Inside, he finds a body and a backpack filled with valuable items, matches a small folding knife, and a whistle. His search is interrupted by the sound of a snapping branch behind the tent. Turning, he sees the same boy from before, who runs away again. Continuing along a stream, the boy notices the water turning red. Upstream, he sees a female cannibal washing knives. Armed with a rock, he follows her back to the camp. After she leaves the area, he sneaks in, carefully stepping over a tripwire with a bell. He begins searching for the medicine among the belongings. In a mirror's reflection, He spots the camp's owner approaching with an axe. Dodging her first strike, a brutal fight ensues. The woman attacks relentlessly, but the bow uses the rock to deliver several blows to her head. Exhausted, he searches the camp for medicine. Spotting the cannibals returning, he quickly hides his tracks, places the bloody rock in his bag, and drags the woman's body out of the camp. Along the way, he drops her axe, leaving another clue for the pursuers. Hiding behind a tree, the boy watches the gang capture a new victim, the young boy who had been following him. He sees the leader give the injured child pills and lock the rest in a chest. The leader then heads to the stream to search for the missing woman, while the other cannibals prepare their captive. However, their plans shift when one of them discovers the axe on the ground. Realizing someone had infiltrated the camp, the cannibals begin combing the forest. Hidden behind a tree, the boy waits until they pass before camouflaging the woman's body with dry grass. Seizing the opportunity while most of the cannibals are away, he sneaks back into the camp. On his way, he peers into a pit filled with human remains, suppressing his nausea. When the injured cannibal goes into the house to rest, the young man crawls over to the boy to free him with the knife he found. However, the boy's frightened screams draw the attention of the injured cannibal, who steps out just as the boy is escaping. Taking advantage of the chaos, the young man heads for the chest containing the medicine. Unfortunately, it is locked, and his attempts to break the lock fail. When the gang returns to the camp and realizes the prisoner has escaped, the furious leader punishes the injured cannibal by hitting him with a stick. Soon after, they discover the woman's body, and the leader notices dirt on the chest, indicating recent tampering. Later that evening, the cannibals hold a funeral pyre for their fallen comrade, refusing to eat her due to some moral principles. That night, hiding under a trailer, the young man notices that the key to the chest hangs around the leader's neck. In the morning, he remembers the matches he found and decides to act. Quietly sneaking into the house where all the cannibals are sleeping, he lights a match and carefully maneuvers between their bodies. Reaching the leader, he cautiously cuts the key from the string with his knife and silently slips outside to open the chest. Finding the bag of medicine, he begins searching for the needed pills. Before leaving, he decides to lock the door of the trailer to slow the cannibals down. However, as he escapes, he accidentally triggers a signal wire, and the sound wakes the entire gang. The pursuers break down the door and give chase. Using his head start, the young man runs as fast as he can. The cannibals follow, but the injured one collapses from exhaustion. Enraged, the leader kicks him to the ground and then crushes his throat with his foot, leaving him to die. The remaining cannibals continue the chase. One of them nearly catches the young man, but he slips away again. Running frantically, he falls off a cliff and lands at the bottom of a ravine. The cannibals, unwilling to jump, try using a bow but miss. While they cautiously descend, the young man climbs the opposite slope and manages to put significant distance between himself and his pursuers. Exhausted, he arrives at the house of the boy and his grandfather. However, he is met with a horrifying sight. The door has been broken down, and the mutilated body of the old man lies on the floor, showing cuts that could have been made by either the cannibals or a pack of dogs. Shocked and filled with guilt, the young man steps outside, where he is ambushed by the cannibals. One of them strikes him on the back of the head, knocking him unconscious. Bound hand and foot, the young man regains consciousness at the cannibals' camp, where they are already stoking a fire in preparation for their brutal feast. Struggling to free himself, he notices a folding knife nearby and begins crawling toward it. However, the leader notices and kicks the knife away. Smirking, the leader takes out a photograph of the young man's father, who had been killed days earlier, and burns it in front of him. Seizing the moment while the cannibals sharpen their knives and ignore him, the young man crawls toward a whistle that has fallen from his backpack. With difficulty, he removes the gag from his mouth and grabs the whistle with his lips. The piercing sound echoes through the forest. Enraged, the leader strikes him hard in the ribs, but it is too late. The noise has drawn a pack of wild dogs. Hearing the barking, the cannibals flee, leaving the captive behind. Once the gang is gone, the young man retrieves the knife, cuts himself free, and hides under a fallen log. The pack, focused on chasing the cannibals, ignores him. Waiting until the dogs pass, he collects scattered supplies, including the crucial medicine. One of the cannibals trips and falls while fleeing. The limping leader, running last, coldly decides he only needs to be faster than the slowest prey. He pulls out a knife and stabs her in the leg before watching indifferently as the pack tears her apart. The rest of the gang, horrified by their leader's cruelty, begins showing signs of discontent but continues the pursuit. During the chase, the young man trips on a root and falls. Realizing he needs a plan, he leaves his jacket on the ground as bait. One of the pursuers sneaks up, only to fall into a trap. The young man jumps on him and a brief struggle ensues. The cannibal gains the upper hand, trying to strangle him, but another cannibal, a lost archer, approaches to help. However, this is part of the young man's plan. He fatally stabs the first attacker and disguises himself in his clothes to deceive the second. Taking the bow, the young man tracks down the leader and shoots him in the leg. The leader falls, but gets back up, preparing for a final confrontation. Hearing the barking dogs, the young man runs away, leaving the wounded leader to face the pack. The leader tries to follow but cannot escape his fate. Wandering in search of safety, the young man finds a bullet and comes across a well-maintained house. On the porch, he discovers a decayed corpse holding a revolver. Taking the weapon, he enters and finds a clean, orderly home with ammunition, canned food, and most importantly, running water. As he stalks up, he hears a noise. The surviving leader enters the house. While the leader searches, the young man grabs an automatic rifle and aims it at him. However, the weapon jams. The cannibal charges and easily overpowers him. A fierce fight ensues, and the young man manages to knock the leader down. But the cannibal pins him and attempts to strangle him. In a desperate move, the young man presses on the leader's arrow wound, causing him to loosen his grip. He grabs the revolver from a nearby shelf and shoots the leader in the head. Gathering the remaining supplies, the young man returns to the boy's house, leaving several cans of food by the door in case the boy returns. When he reaches his cabin, he finds the door wide open. Realizing his journey was in vain, he sits on the ground in despair and begins to cry. At that moment, the girl approaches from behind and places a hand on his shoulder. On this intriguing note, the film ends. Thank you for watching. Until the end, don't miss the next video.